If you want to build credibility as a marketing, a product, or customer success leader, sharing customer feedback is the fastest way to do it because you can't dispute customer feedback as a data point.
Welcome to the Human Insight Podcast, where we help you bridge the empathy gap to bring you a valuable, new understanding of some of the most innovative ideas and trends shaping the future of business and customer experience.
I'm Janelle Estes, Chief Insights Officer at UserTesting, and today we're very excited to have Emily Carrion, VP of Marketing at Esper, join us on this episode of the Human Insight Podcast. Thanks so much for joining us today, Emily, and welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, Emily, your background and your role at Esper?
Yeah, happy to. So ever since my MBA, I got hooked on the autonomy of working at startups. So I've kind of become a serial growth stage marketer. And my favorite time to join a company is as the first executive marketer, right after the Series A, when there's hopefully product market fit and there's customers who love the product. And then from there, I get to scale revenue, I get to scale the team and really help the company grow. So my specialty has been in B2B SaaS companies, and I've been in a host of different industries from mobile, cybersecurity, customer experience, and now DevOps. And Esper is my sixth startup. I joined about a year ago and have been building out the marketing function and our go-to-market strategy. And it's an all-encompassing role that's been really fun.
I love your story, and I love how you focused on, the types of startups and sort of stage of startup that is sort of your sweet spot. And that's awesome that you're able to do that. And you've done it now, this, like you said, 6 times. So that's amazing. Can you tell us a little bit more about Esper and its, position as a category leader within, I guess, the Internet of Things?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So there's actually billions of IoT devices. And typically when we think of this, maybe like your Alexa device comes to mind. We're focused on the business side of IoT devices. So we call them edge devices. And as you can imagine, the space is really exploding. There's literally billions of them. So it could be anything from a point of sale tablet to a connected fitness device to a ticketing kiosk. And then what we do at Esper is it's Devops for devices. So what does that mean? It's all the underlying infrastructure that devs, developers, and engineers use so that they can focus on the apps. So it's basically just how, like with AWS, they take care of all the underlying infrastructure of your website. We do the same thing of all the underlying infrastructure of your device. So if you need to send an update or have a security patch, we cover all of that. So you just get to focus on your app. And what's really cool is some of the use cases we get to power. So it's anything from like a Peloton Compete connected fitness experience to tablets for students in rural India to healthcare devices for COPD patients.
Yeah, it sounds like a range of solutions that you support, which is incredible. I love to always think about sort of like beyond the tech, right? What is the impact that you're having in the world? And yeah, it sounds like there's plenty of and endless, perhaps, use cases. So Esper's been growing. You just announced a $60 million funding round. So congrats on that. Any big plans for that money that you can share with us?
Oh man, yeah, it's been a big week over here. This brought us to just over 100 million in funding in a very quick span of time. And really where we're going to be spending it is on how do we get in front of more, large enterprise customers. So for me, a lot of that means building a brand, very recognizable brand. So people think of us first and really know that we exist. Because I like to say that we're inventing the future. We're taking what cloud engineers have been used to having on the DevOps side, and we're bringing that same experience to devices, which are much further behind in terms of what they get to use. So I'm doing that in a couple ways. We're basically building a media company where do you go to learn about, launching a fleet of devices from scratch? Where do you go if you want to stay up to date on growing your fleet of millions of devices. Like, how do you do it? What are the best practices? We want to be the place for you to find that. So that involves, growing the team, building out the product even more, and all the things you can think about.
Yeah, it's exciting. Sounds like a really exciting time to be at the company. And as you mentioned, this is your sixth startup, and so you're essentially a startup veteran and an investor. And you've led, marketing and communication efforts at different companies and startups like Textio, Apptentive, and Mixpo. One of the things that I think about a lot, of course, is the presence of women in particular as founders, as board members, as senior leaders. What do you think about the progress there being made, in the tech industry and what still needs to be done?
Well, I can definitely say we have a long way to go. And I've had the privilege of working most recently with two really amazing female CEOs, Kieran Snyder over at Textio, and then Frances Dewing when I was at Rubica. So there is no shortage of amazing female talent, that's for sure. And I think the thing of where we need to go, I feel really grateful that I've had a lot of champions help me get where I am today. And I think we need even more of that for additional women. So, for example, how I found out about Esper is a friend of mine is at Madrona Ventures, one of the biggest VCs in Seattle. And, I've had a relationship with him for a while. He knows my story, my background. And I went to him first when I was looking for my next role and said, hey, who should I be talking to? And he said, oh, Esper is the cream of the crop in my portfolio. Like you should definitely talk to them. And they're looking for their VP of marketing. So by being championed by him making that introduction, it was a whole totally different conversation with, Yadu, both the trust there of like, I'm vetted, I've been in the Madrona portfolio before and done, good work. So I think it's how do we identify talent, but female talent quicker and help people. I've had a lot of people help me in my journey. And I've also been given, like, part of why I love coming in at early stage companies is you have a real opportunity to prove yourself because you're growing so fast. There are so many opportunities. Like, there is no shortage of work to be done. And if you want to take it on, usually it's like, great, go do the thing, go, prove it out and show that. So that's part of why I wouldn't be a VP at Microsoft right now. It would take a lot longer to move up the ranks, but by choosing, smaller companies, places where I have amazing, leadership from the founding team, there's been room to kind of find a place. And now it's on me also to how do we cultivate and bring more talent.
Yeah, I think that a lot of that resonates with me. And I think you're spot on in terms of, being more, I guess, efficient or effective at identifying talent and then, fostering that talent, but also having champions that help or sponsors even. I can certainly relate to that same experience. You mentioned a little bit about what you're focused on in terms of, marketing and building a brand, with your most recent round of funding. Can you tell us a little bit about, other things you're thinking about maybe this quarter, next quarter, and even, into 2022 and beyond?
Yeah, absolutely. So definitely Esper is the most complex go-to-market that I've run because there's the ecosystem of hardware meets software there's a lot of stuff going on there. So for me, what I'm very excited about in the near term is we're really expanding on with our partnerships. So everything we're doing is we're trying to find that moment in time when people are looking to grow their device fleet, like switch hardware, add a new set of hardware, or they're looking to build a fleet from scratch. There's a very small window when they're in the buying mode. And so one way to get access, to get those insights is to actually partner with hardware partners. So OEMs, for example, like Samsung or Lenovo sell hardware. So we really want to build out that ecosystem so that we can be the other half of the solution when someone's looking to, build out a new experience for their customers. So that's a big area I'm focused on. Also growing the brand. So I'm very excited about building this media company. We just hired the top editor-in-chief in our space. We brought him over from Android Police. And he totally understands our audience and is going to build out something really special here. And like, that's my favorite thing, is anchor on content and providing a ton of value before I try, like before then. So my whole thing is, how do I build a lot of trust, show a lot of value, and then hopefully be the obvious choice of who you work with. So those are two of the initiatives I'm really pumped about.
Yeah, that's exciting. That's exciting hire. And that's really strategic and thoughtful for you to be focused on providing value through content, right? And like you said, building that trust and building that relationship and eventually being the obvious choice. It's interesting being in the B2B space. I'm sure, it's very different and sometimes similar too, but mostly different from the consumer world, just given you have different people that are involved in the purchasing process. You've got end users, you've got, buyers and stakeholders. So it's a more, I think, challenging yet interesting dynamic to try to understand in terms of customer understanding. I'd love to hear from you in terms of, you and your customers and how you think about hearing from and talking to customers directly. I believe you're a fan of this practice, but can you share a little bit about why you believe it's important to hear directly from your customers, in their own voices, and even see them in real life, right? Either real time or even through video.
There's kind of two moments when we get like very unique feedback. So I think like I've been working on this product now for like almost a year. So I feel like I have drunk the Kool-Aid, right? I'm creating the Kool-Aid and I've been drinking the Kool-Aid, and like I have a perspective on what I think, how to say it, what we should be doing. What I love about user feedback or new hire feedback or customer feedback is it's this totally like outside of the box. Like, what are they seeing? And I can give you an example from my last company. So we had a cybersecurity product for consumers, and we were getting, so this is kind of the journey of customer feedback and how it came through. But so our customer support team was seeing some trends, and that it was too hard for our customers to connect to the VPN. And so we took that to the engineering team. We're like, look, it's too hard. And they're like, oh, it's not too hard. They can just do this and that and this thing. And like this really convoluted workaround that they as engineers were very comfortable with. And our customer support team was like, that's too hard. Like, they're not gonna be able to do that. And they're like, oh yeah, they can do that. Let's go build something else. So we're like, okay, how do we show them how hard this is? So I am a UserTesting fan. We actually spun it up and, had asked people to go through this. We got to, to collect the video. We asked them to, jot down, to talk through what they were going through. And it was hysterical, right? Because you literally hear them say like, what the heck? Like, this makes no sense, right? And then there was some, colorful language also involved. And then the engineering team, like, they can't argue with that, right? Like, it's in their face. They're seeing a vision, the screen. And my favorite part is we could then accurately diagnose where's the worst of this problem. It's not this whole thing is a problem, but we found that like this one step was like everyone got stuck here. And it was like, and by everyone, my sample size was like 5, right? It doesn't have to be this massive sample size, but when you're getting to watch people, you don't need as big of a sample size because it's really obvious. Okay, every single person has got stuck here. So that's my favorite way to be like, this isn't my opinion versus your opinion. Like, let's see what the customer is trying. We're trying to get them through this so they can have what's the success moment? And then let's watch if they can get there and how they get there. And then how do we make it more delightful for them? So I'm a big advocate of getting that feedback. And it's a major tool in my arsenal for this isn't my opinion, but like, let's figure this out together.
Yeah, absolutely. I love how you're able to pull perspective from the support team, which I think is one of the most valuable teams in an organization for understanding where the experience is falling down. I also think it's fascinating. Like, you probably, with that VPN sort of connect experience, you probably had data, right, on how many people were actually connecting and probably, what suboptimal sort of, performance there. but actually being able to see the why, right? To like truly understand and connect with like a human. So engineer as a human connecting with the other person as a human trying to connect to the VPN. Like there's something there in terms of truly understanding, having it click, and then even acting with urgency, right? To go fix it once you understand what the issue
You're
is.
so spot on, because both of those things we didn't have. So we made a bunch of assumptions.
Yeah.
And so they were spinning up lots of different pieces of work that didn't end up being, the way I sold it to them was like, hey, I'm going to go run this so that you can pinpoint the exact area for you to spend cycles. I don't want us guessing what it is. And because we did have data, and then we had every type of data, and yet we still were making guesses of how to fix it versus like getting to see how to fix it.
Yeah, that's the power of this type of feedback for sure. Like seeing the world through your customer's eyes, right? It just all kind of clicks. Otherwise, like you said, you're just sort of like, I always think of just like throwing a dart in the dark, and hoping you hit the bullseye. Like probably not a good chance of that happening,
right? Like we don't have time to guess. Yeah. Like in startups, like there's 49,000 things you can do in any given moment. So figuring out how to aim our very limited resources is critical, because really I want the engineering team to be building our next features, making our products so much better. But if they can't even use it, then they don't get to that, like the rest of the magic. So it's like, how does it help us focus where to spend time and energy? And I think that's the power of different types of feedback.
Yeah, building the next features and also feeling great about the experiences that they have built, right? I'm sure you saw in your data after you made that fix, the numbers went up and they're probably celebrating a bit. And I hope
the best part of customer feedback is when it's like, this is awesome. We love this part of your product, or we love your customer success folks, or like, you're so much better than XYZ, what I was trying to do before. So yeah, it's like, talk about the best way to like be a cheerleader for your company is to bring in positive feedback to like, yes, keep going. This is working. Let's do this. Yeah, it definitely has both sides.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a great point too. I've found that teams are much more receptive to the hard news and the hard feedback when they're also hearing the good stuff as well. And I think sometimes we forget that part. So that's a really great point, to make sure that that positive feedback is funneled to them as well. Let's see here. So, we talked a little bit about how startups, obviously you're moving fast, you don't have a ton of resources, there's a million things to do, and you often have to go through like ruthless prioritization. So do you have any advice for startups on prioritizing customer feedback and user testing?
Yeah. So I do a lot of advising of like really, really early stage startups when you literally just have an idea. And I think throughout the process, feedback, I'm big on feedback clearly, but I think especially when you're really early stage, what I found is founders want to get to building as quickly as possible. And they think that because they have the problem, everyone else has the problem. So, we call it like, will the dog eat the dog food? But it's like, test those initial assumptions. And like to run this test, I think it's like $50 a person, right? If you use users, like, yes, I'm a user testing fan, but it's really cheap, right? To like actually just get a very small sample size and ask people. So if I'm talking to university students, I'm like, spin up a survey, but make sure that survey is going to your ideal customer. Don't just ask your family and friends. They might not be your ideal customer. So it's like, nail down who that ideal customer is, and then get feedback of those actual humans so that you don't spin cycles creating something for you that nobody else wants. And the other piece I think tied to that is like, what will people pay for? Because I think that's the other half of testing is like, one is like, listen for like that aha moment, hear their experience. But people also want you to feel good. So another real test I've seen is like, will they swipe a credit card for it? Will they give you their time, or specifically will they like, I will pay for this, even if it's $5. Otherwise, you're like, yeah, I'm totally onto something. All these people have said they want it. And it's like, well, but will they pay for it? So that's something I've learned on my journey with startups. Like there's so many different ways to get feedback. You can run your own surveys. You can use a tool like UserTesting. You can listen to your support. Like there's a myriad of ways you can do this. And there's really no excuse not to. Like we have to always be on the pulse so that we can focus.
Yeah. I love that. There's no excuse not to do it. I think you're so spot on though, especially with that beginning part where you were talking about, making sure that you're vetting ideas and concepts before you, or even just vetting the problem itself, right? Is this the right problem to solve before you move into solutioning? Because you're right that many teams just jump into solutioning before truly understanding all of the nuances of the issue. But that place is very uncomfortable to be because it's the unknown, right? It's very squishy. But I, like you, always suggest teams spend more time there, even though it's uncomfortable.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So any advice you have for developing some, regular cadence or continuous engagement with customers?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is working with customers is not only the job of the customer success or the customer support team. It really needs to be in the DNA of the whole company. Whether you call it customer obsession or just that emphasis on we care about that customer love, customer obsession, like that DNA needs to be in the whole company. So for us at Esper, like our number one value is trust. Our customers have to have trust in the platform, meaning like it has to stay up, right? It has to do what it says it does. We need to be secure. Then our customers need to trust that we are the experts in the field. Like we are the experts at the Android operating system and at all these different types of hardware. They have to trust that when we, like on my side, when we write something, it needs to be technically accurate so that we don't lose credibility. They need to trust what we say. So it's like all these different ways that for us, trust is this kind of underlying value that we build everything on top. And that's so that the customer has an amazing experience. I mean, one of the key advantages of startups or growth stage companies is part of how we've built Esper so quickly. We surround our customers with like a lot of different experts to make sure that they are successful. And my favorite thing is hearing feedback from them of like, oh my gosh, like you guys are one of our top vendors. You take such good care of us. Like you fix things quickly if anything goes wrong. We know you are the experts in the area and the space. And like that's how we get, that's how we help the relationship stay sticky. That's how you get referrals. Like it's this kind of flywheel if you do it right. And I've seen the opposite with other companies. If they drop the ball on that, or they get too big, or they start focusing less on the customer, you have to go through 4 tiers of support just to talk to a human. And it's like, that's a crappy experience. Like, why would someone stay working with you? So for us, and the different companies I've been at, like we've really driven that home. I think it can be a competitive advantage to consistently focus on customer engagement, having them top of mind, letting them influence the roadmap and all different things like that.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right that it is a competitive advantage. This continuous connection with customers. What are some ways that you do that at Esper? I believe you have an advisory board. So maybe tell us a bit about that and maybe other ways that you pull in regular customer feedback.
Yeah, absolutely. So we do it across a lot of different teams, which is really awesome. So we have an amazing customer success team. When we bring on a customer, there's a very strong handoff from the sales team to the pre-sales. So for us, pre-sales is like going through that proof of concept, testing out the hardware with our software on it, making sure it works. I mean, we have devices from every different customer in the office. So we've got what they are looking at. Like we often go to site to make sure launch goes really smoothly. So we're talking to customers all along the way. And something that's really special is most of them let us tell their stories publicly, which, that not every company lets you do that. And we've gotten to do that on a lot of different ways. something that we will build out, that I've built out at past companies, is a customer advisory board. So how do we bring in the business leaders, and so that they get to talk to their peers and stay ahead of what's coming next? They get to talk to our experts and know what's coming in the industry. And then they get to have feedback on the roadmap. Like, they're the experts of what their business is trying to do, of the, what they're trying to solve for their customers. So we need that insight. We need to know, how do they want to see this sea of data that we have about their devices? Like, what would be helpful? What do they need to communicate up to their board? So I think we'll get there. Like, we're still pretty early on, but we now have a wealth of customers that can also learn from each other. And that's when that synergy is so fun, when you see light bulbs going off for different people in completely different industries. They're like, oh, we could do it that way too. Like, I never thought about that. And then that's when it really just gets fun. And then eventually you get them together. Someday when we're allowed to get people back together, you can have a customer conference and let them meet each other and talk about what they're doing, and, let the good times keep rolling.
Yeah, I can relate to that feeling. There's nothing better than getting a group of your customers together and seeing light bulbs go off, but also learning so much from them and the perspectives that they share. Because, as I mentioned before, in the B2B space, it's just the relationship and sort of the ecosystem of people within a single customer that you work with is fairly complex. And so it's so helpful to have the different perspectives on an ongoing basis. As a marketer, there's no shortage of content and positioning and other things that you're working on, among many other things. Do you have any favorite, marketing related touch points or experiences that you like to get feedback on, like ad copy or brand campaigns or even overall messaging? Like, do you have a fun use case that you love to get feedback on? I'd love to hear from you on that.
Yeah, I mean, my absolute favorite is talking to direct customers and hearing I love hopping on, getting a half hour, an hour with a customer and just hearing hey, tell me about your job. Tell me about your company. Tell me about what you're trying to accomplish for your customers. And then, tell me about your experience with Esper, the product, with the people at Esper. That's my absolute favorite thing to do, because then that instantly translates in, who else like this can we serve? What from this person can I help find the next 10 people like them? And literally asking them, where do you read? Where do you, get your information? How do you stay top of mind? Do you go to conferences? Because our ideal customers, I want to find more people like them. So learning from, how they go about, because I can tell you, developers, engineers, they get information very differently than you and I. So getting into their head and fully understanding that is super valuable, as we're still, figuring out what channels, how do we, get the information to the right people, how do they help them find us? And then, seeing what ad copy sings, or testing out a different web page and seeing where people get stuck, looking at the heat map and seeing oh, they're really drawn here. I wonder why. Let's go find out, or let's create more content like that. It's really interesting seeing, as we're building this content engine, what is stuff people find and really valuable. And then how do we figure out the journey for them to, try out the product or have a, great experience with us. So that's all those pieces are super fun for my nerd brain.
Yeah, I'm also a nerd when it comes to this stuff. So yes, love the use cases around, web pages and websites and making sure those things are seamless, ad campaigns and gathering reactions. But I really love your emphasis on just connecting with customers, right? So spending time with them, understand how they think, right? Build empathy and start to see patterns and trends across your customers. I mean, I think in a space like, let's say consumer retail, it's very easy to make assumptions. I think in a lot of those cases around, typical shoppers want XYZ because I'm a typical shopper, or, it's easy to sort of make those assumptions, where when you have an audience that's totally different from you and they're in a role that you're not intimately familiar with, there's so much to learn. And I think when we put things like a brand campaign or a website in front of someone, that's great feedback, but it's very contained, right? It's like you're just getting feedback on that one thing. Whereas your conversations are probably so open-ended and it's probably a journey in itself to go through that conversation.
Yeah, you nailed it.
So what are your thoughts on gathering this customer feedback in our current environment where everyone's still essentially working from home and connecting to customers remotely through methods like Zoom or even UserTesting?
I honestly think it's made it easier to get feedback. I don't know what you're seeing, but usually customers have a half hour, especially if they don't have to travel and they don't have to dress up for it, right? So I've found that it's grabbing a half an hour, hey, no pressure. This is for internal use only, unless you're cool with it being public. But I'm just trying to, learn more about you and your role. It's very rare people say no to that. It's, worst case, it's oh, I can, but in a couple weeks after this big deliverable. So that's been great. And then the other piece that I've loved is different people across our company are all talking to customers or all talking to prospects. And when we get to record the conversation, more people can hear it in the organization. So I just did a call with a customer a couple weeks ago, recorded the call, and then I could say, here's my bullets of what I took away, but you can actually listen to the customer yourself. Whereas if I had gone and met the customer, they don't get to see how he lit up and got excited about certain things. They don't get to see seeing his face talk about what we do for him individually and his company. That was really powerful. So to get to give that experience to my whole company was a really big gift, right? So from the sales, everyone that met him, brought him on, helped him become a customer, to all the different support engineers, solution engineers, people building the product, they all got to hear directly from him because it's recorded. So I think there's something really special about that.
Yeah, no, but I think you have a good point there around the context is different now with working from home, right? People now have multiple working environments versus just a single going to the office and sitting at my desk. And so being able to capture that in ways by, connecting with customers remotely from home, I understand what you're saying there. I have heard the part about it being easier to connect with people, because like you said, everyone's from home, no one's on a, plane to China or, business travel type things. But I hadn't heard the fact that, now you can record these and share these almost as a gift, right, to internal teams. And that's a really fantastic point. I hadn't thought about that before, where it's before, yeah, you just take a customer out to coffee and you talk about things, right? But then it was only you that got to see it and it was your sort of spin on it. And it's the game of telephone, right? Hey, I met with so-and-so customer and here are all my notes, but it's coming through your kind of filter, right? Whereas now, like you said, everybody can sort of consume it and, see what they take away too. I love that. All right. So we're going to move on to lightning questions. So these are just quick questions we'll run through. We do this with every podcast guest. What's a book you've recently read that you'd recommend to our listeners?
One that comes to mind is Who, Not How. So it's a book by Ben Hardy and Dan Sullivan, and it basically talks about it. This really resonated with me because often got a problem, how do I solve it? And their whole message is, instead of getting into solution mode, think about who can help you. So is it someone that's already been through that before, that you could pick their brain for 15 minutes and you're eons ahead of where you would have started? Or is it someone that literally can take something off your plate because they are an expert in that area? So as we're growing the team and, my responsibilities are shifting, we're all leveling up as leaders. That's something that's very top of mind to me is who's my who? Where's my who? Who can help me with this?
I love it. What's a piece of advice that you'd give to someone trying to convince others to invest in customer feedback? I know you're a big believer, but believe it or not, there are plenty of companies and teams that have deprioritized customer feedback. So any advice there?
I mean, The way I think about it is that if you want to build credibility as a marketing, a product, or customer success leader, sharing customer feedback is the fastest way to do it because you can't dispute customer feedback as a data point.
Love it. It's very true. You can't argue with what your customer says or does. Awesome. So you've been in the field of customer experience. Obviously, you're very aware of what makes a great experience. Personally, have you had a great experience recently? And if so, can you tell us about it?
If this is going to sound silly, but our office isn't by a lot of food areas. Like we're kind of like in this little island, and we work with for lunch. Like one of our perks is like lunch is delivered every day, and we use this company called Peached, and it's so delightful. Like they make it so hard to forget to order lunch. They send me a text, they send me an email, they send me a picture. All I have to do is hit yes, and like lunch shows up magically. So they've really thought through the customer experience. Like they make it literally dead simple. And like they give me options of what I get to pick for lunch. I get to like rate it. So that affects what they're going to bring tomorrow. So it's an amazing perk that we have at Esper. And then now that we found Peached, it's just like lunch made simple.
I love that. Yeah. And especially when you're working and busy and running from meeting to meeting, you can sometimes the time gets away from you, right? You're like, wait a second, it's 1 o'clock and I haven't eaten yet. I'm looking them up now. Yeah. It says, what does it say?
It's like peached. Like
peached. Their tagline is lunch should be amazing. And it sounds like it is for you.
It's delightful. Yes.
Awesome. So last question here. When you think about the future of marketing, what are you most excited about?
Well, when I think about this, there's some things in marketing that never change. I think always and forever, it'll be our job to deeply understand our customer. Like, what do they care about? What makes their life easier? What pain or challenge can we solve? And then our job is how do we connect that to how our product can help them, help their company, and hopefully help the greater good. If we landed at a mission-driven company, which thankfully I have. And then what changes is how do we deliver that message? So the channels or the mediums that we have. I mean, one of the things I think that is both fun and really challenging about being a marketer is there's an explosion of channels and they're getting noisier and noisier. So how do we break through the noise? And I think the best way to do that is like really authentically knowing what our customer, like what do they most care about and how do we match incredible content with knowing them like really intimately, right? Like we know what you care about. We know we have people like you, like we are in this together. And those messages are hard to ignore. But I think that's our challenge, right? Like the world is so noisy and yet we have something that can make your life better. So how do we make those connection points to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. I can see how that's an exciting sort of view of the future. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining us today. This has been incredibly valuable. I'd love just to hear your perspective and thank you for sharing your expertise.
Well, it's been so much fun chatting with you, Janelle.
Want to keep the conversation going? You can visit our podcast hub, usertesting.com/podcast, and check out past episodes. If you haven't already, don't forget to follow us on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Overcast, or Google Play, so you can never miss a good episode. And if you enjoyed today's show, please share it with a friend or leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts.